I think I can hear it now. Can you hear me now? All right, thank you.
While Annie Rose is rustling up some other folks to join us this morning. I'm not Rob Lund. Rob is out today and asked me to introduce this program today. I want to say a couple of words about why Mike Williams and Citizens Project are here on Just Peace Sunday. I see that was a question. A few years ago, when Don was here, we rejuvenated the Just Peace group in church. We did a survey of the congregation of what issues were most important to you. And the answers came back: environmental justice, which has since been renamed as creation justice, economic justice, racial and community justice. And these were buckets of issues that really encompass a whole range of justice and equity issues in our community and in the world. As many of you know, I've been on the board of Citizens Project for the last 6 years. I'm about ready to roll off. And Citizens Project is, just like this church, a nonpartisan church, but it doesn't mean a nonpartisan organization, which means it doesn't do partisan politics, but it does stand up for values and make those values known. And the values of this church and the values of Citizens Project, equity, inclusion, and justice, are really very much in alignment. So I've been proud of being in that organization. Now, my time on the board was riddled with a pandemic as our lives were disrupted. So I got to be board chair for 2 years without a board meeting in person. We went through 2 total staff transitions, executive directors and every other staff member. And I say that only to highlight that when we picked Mike Williams to be our executive director at the tail end of that pandemic, it was the beginning of a new beginning for Citizens Project and its role in this community. Mike has born and raised and lived in this community. He has been in many different ways in community service. He worked with the District 11 equity projects and committees when they had them. He was a co-founder of Neighbors for Education, and he has, for the last few years, been the executive director of Citizens Project. So I'm feeling very good I can roll off the board knowing that the organization is in really good hands. But the connection to Just Peace is that all of the things that we say we care about, right? Racial justice, community justice, creation justice, economic justice, all of those things ultimately are a function of the laws we pass in a democratic society. And elections, therefore, are important, including school board elections coming up. Elisa Webb has a table with some information about that if you want to go visit her. But this isn't about particular candidates, but it is about values. And so whether it's national elections or local elections, these values are very much in play. And if we want to see the Just Peace initiatives become law and policy in our communities, in our land, then we have to pay attention to the electoral process, and voting rights and voting participation is core to that. And so that's the context in which we invited Mike to come be our forum speaker today and to talk about the work of Citizens Project in educating voters, providing informed and engaged voters and informed and engaged citizens in our community. Mike, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me back. That means I didn't do terrible the first time. I got the honor to be here with you all. I'm definitely grateful to be here and talk a little bit about this work that we've been doing and what's happening in the community in some different places. And sometimes when we are doing work, we can only do it or think about it from the perspective that we sit in. Can we agree? generally speaking, right? And voting is an issue that has plagued not voting really is an issue that has plagued our community and really 34 and under since before I was born, right? Last November, 34 and under in El Paso County voted at a rate of 12.6%, right? Last November. 70 to 79 voted at a rate of 89.7% in El Paso, right? So congratulations, right, if you're in that latter group, right? The first group is a huge demographic, a huge population of our city, county, state, and got the opportunity through the World Affairs Council to talk to some people that are doing similar work around the country, or around the world actually, not country, and they were saying, hey, so what do you guys do to get younger voters to vote? And I just started laughing. I said, so it's an international problem then, right? And the reality is, in that group specifically, it's for a myriad of reasons that people aren't voting, right? Now, how it does affect us more, like Sky did say, I'm from Colorado Springs. I've been here since I was 6 months old. My mom and dad were in the Army. I was born in Germany, and then we came here at 6 months, and I've been here for 33 and a half, almost 34 years since then, right? So definitely honored to be here and from here, but the majority of that time has been in the southeast of the city. To this day, I bought a house a street away from the house I grew up in as a kid, right? Because that community means so much to me, right? That district, though, is the third lowest voting district in the entire state. The two districts that are ahead of it for lower voting population are rural areas, right? So it's the biggest metropolitan area that does not vote in the entire state, right? An example of that, average district in this municipal election voted about 23,000 voters, right, per district. House District 17, which is really City Council District 4, had about 7,000 people that voted, right? Also, as a result of this and some other factors, is a 16-year sort of life expectancy in my district that I live and grew up in than any other district in the city. Meaning if somebody drives 5 minutes away, their life expectancy goes up 16 years, right? And it's not just because of voting, it's because of one of the things you guys said is creation justice. I love that phraseology, right? There's very little trees down there, so it's about 3 to 4 degrees hotter in the southeast than other parts of the city. There's transportation in Colorado Springs has been an issue for a long time. Since I was a kid, it takes me 6 minutes to go to the Citadel Mall in my car. If I took the bus, it would take 40 minutes to get to the Citadel Mall. So transportation is an issue as well. And then with the lack of transportation comes lack of opportunity, right? So something that we, Citizens Project, has been doing, because I think a lot of times we can say we know why people aren't doing certain things, and we have a hunch why people aren't doing certain things like voting. I was blessed to be able to be raised in a family that told me, like, this is what your grandparents had to do for us to be able to vote, right? So voting was a very serious thing. I missed one election in my lifetime, and that was when my dad passed away, and I just wasn't in the mental space to vote. I was worried about voting at that time. I was worried about when my dad passed away. But other than that one election cycle, I have not missed an election since I was 18 years old, right? But I'm unique. You look at my wife, who only votes because she's married to me, right? If she wasn't married to me, she probably wouldn't vote. She'd be a low propensity voter is what we call it, right? So there's a bunch of reasons, and we wanted to figure out more why. And if you don't mind bringing up that survey, the study, we did a Citizens Project got the opportunity to do a low voter turnout survey in House District 17, and I'm gonna relate this all back around. And these are some major takeaways. If you're interested, you can go to our website. It's a full 22-page report that we put together on some of the findings. And this is just some highlights of those, right? So 95% of all respondents, and we talked to about 400 people, believe that local elections matter. And everybody we talked to, of course, said, yep, I'm voting just about. Just about everybody was like, yeah, I'm voting, because we were in front of them, right? And I was like, somebody's not telling the truth, statistically, unless we just talk to the only people that vote, right? 85% of all respondents believe their vote mattered, but only 19% of registered voters in District 4 cast a ballot in the April 2023 election. So we can see there's a big gap, right? People saying they feel their vote matters, people understanding that elections are important, but only just shy of a fifth of the district actually participating in a municipal election, right? So challenges by race, we wanted to break this down just to kind of see. Uh, in the white demographic, 35% said they have scheduling conflicts and they don't trust mail-in ballots. And again, that's highlighted by some more national issues, right? And the distrust that came nationally. We got the opportunity, I got the opportunity this past Thursday and Friday to speak at a conference in Denver, and we got to meet with the county clerk, Denver County clerk, and showed us that process really fully. I understood it, I thought, and really all the checks and balances that go into a ballot being cast to being counted were more than I knew about, and this is what I do for a living, right? So a thing we're gonna do, more information push out is that, so people understand how secure elections really are, because there has been national rhetoric, so people feel otherwise, right? In the Black community, I have scheduling conflicts and I forget when to vote. We saw this a lot when we did our community feedback on this survey. We were in rooms that had about 150 people in them, and 6 of the 150 knew there was a municipal election, right? So this is from January to March. Of that entire room, only 6 people outside of our organization knew that there was a municipal election. And they said, didn't we just vote in November? I said, yes, you did. And you voted in the primary, right? And you're voting now, and you're gonna vote in the runoff, and we gotta vote again in the school board election, right? The Hispanic community, I have scheduling conflicts, forget when to vote. API, European, and other, I forget when to vote. Don't know where to vote, and they don't trust mail-in ballots, right? So you can kind of see some of these things. Scheduling conflicts, forgot when to vote, don't trust mail-in ballots were the 3 most common. But when you look at some of the unregistered voters, and we didn't get people's personal information because in HD 17, there's a lot of undocumented citizens. Like a lot of my neighbors are undocumented, right? And we didn't want them to feel that they couldn't answer the survey or couldn't be honest, right? We wanted them to still feel safe and secure. And something we realize is a lot of the people that are undocumented in our community are very much encouraging their youth that are documented to vote. And that's another generation that's coming up that will be very much encouraged to vote. Ballots not written in my primary language is 20% of the issue, right? So imagine 1 of 5 people not being able to understand the ballot because it's not written in their primary language. And a lot of times we only think about like English and Spanish. There's a lot of people speaking Mandarin, French. There's a lot of different languages in the African diaspora that are in our community as well. And they weren't sure how to even fully understand the ballot because it's not written in the primary language. And there are some laws in Colorado when it comes to statewide and national elections that kind of help out with that. Somebody can call, get somebody to help them translate, et cetera. But all those resources are not available in a municipal election, right? And that's something that we're still advocating and fighting for. Transportation is not convenient, don't know where to vote and forget where to vote, right? So 33% of the people that we talked to said that the ballot measures are hard to understand. I would assume that of this group, the majority of you all participate in elections. Would we all agree that sometimes they can put a comma or an and or a not in a place that makes it the whole thing confusing, right? Everybody raise their hands on that. So we try to do things like Citizens Project as an organization. We try to take that full blue book, make it like 4 or 5 pages and easy to understand. The problem that we also found is availability of resources, right? I think we publish it in the Indie and we do a bunch of runover so we can put it in different places. When I said in my community, I was the executive director for Citizens Project, they said, congratulations on starting a nonprofit. I said, Citizens Project has been here for almost 30 years at the time, 29 years at the time. So the awareness in that community was not very high. Does that make sense? Downtown, certain places around the community, absolutely. So a big thing I try to echo to people, and I would encourage you all as you're doing this work, is to meet people where they are. Does that make sense? So something we did is handed out over 400 I want to say it was like 600 and some odd of our voter surveys and our voter guides in the Southeast. We took it to people, their houses, different places they congregate, stores, athletics, libraries, etc. So people had that resources. I don't think it was solely us, but I would like to think a lot of the work we did helped. There was a 3% increase in the voter turnout from the first part of the city council mayoral election to the mayoral runoff, about a 3% increase of turnout, just from simply going down there, talking to people, saying, hey, here to vote, here's the survey, these are the two candidates that are running, these are their answers on questions. We obviously don't highlight an individual, but we just wanted to get them the information in their hands so they can make the proper decisions. Does that make sense? So that's good on the survey, but I also wanted to highlight this. And 2 years ago, District 11 had an amendment, School District 11 had an amendment that was 4B. And I keep this on my phone because I look at it at least once a week, probably because I'm a little dramatic, but it's powerful to me, and it's like crazy to think about that. 4B, right, so would have supported $350 million of bonds for school facility construction and capital improvement in District 11. Did anybody in here besides myself attend District 11 schools, any schools? Couple people, you guys are the best if you did. Not saying if you didn't, you're not great. I'm a little biased though, right? But there are buildings in District 11 that they're so thick with concrete, as an example, that Wi-Fi doesn't get through the whole school. There's over 20 schools in District 11 to this day still that do not have air conditioning in the summertime. And the heat in the summertime, or the heat in the wintertime, there's classes that are like 65 degrees while people are trying to learn, like to this day in 2023, right? So this amendment that was proposed last time was supposed to fill in some of those gaps, right? Get air conditioning to all the schools, heat, a CTE facility so that all the students in District 11 high schools can get bused to one facility and learn their trade, whether that be medical, being an electrician, plumber, whatever the case may be, and the school district paid for it, right? So that was the proposal. So that voted yes for that was 27,465 people voted yes. That voted no for that was 27,476. That is an 11 vote difference. Does that make sense to everybody? So I look at that all the time because people, when they say my vote doesn't matter, which I hear a lot. Things aren't that important. I say, hey, do you have kids in District 11? Absolutely. Did you vote in the last election? No. And then I show them that and they're like, really, that happened? Absolutely, right? So it's a little bit harder for people to complain about the resources once they're educated and knowing that they weren't even aware there was an election or that was on the ballot for them to vote on. Does that make sense? So we're just trying to do things to highlight some of these issues that are going on in the community. And as we did our low voter turnout survey, talking to some of the younger voters, it was asked that we do a voter 101. I do see my family. I'm gonna tell you guys what stuff we're doing, and I promise you guys I'll see my family. After all this, you'll understand why I say that. But they said, can you guys do a voter 101, right? Like a civics course that a lot of high schools do teach, right? But they don't pay attention because it's their teacher as opposed to somebody in the community, because a lot of schools actually still teach this stuff, right? So we started putting on voter 101s, right? And then now we're in conjunction with League of Women Voters, Colorado Latino Votes, Neighbors for Education. We're working on going into all the schools in the county that we're able to get into and teach like a voter 101, like what does this office you're voting for do? What's the power that this office has? How does it impact you on a daily basis? Because I've heard in almost every election in my lifetime that this election is the most important election in our lifetime. Has anybody heard that before? Right? I heard that this week. Somebody said this election in 2024 is the most important. I said, whoa, we have an election in a couple months that is very, very important, right? So I have the belief that all elections are important, and local elections are the ones that impact us on a day-to-day basis the most, and those are the ones, unfortunately, most people don't participate in, right? So they're not even able to make all the decisions that they need to make. So saying that to say, they said, hey, can you do voter 101s? So we did a series of voter 101s. We did a series, where this is gonna go on forever, as long as I'm here at least. I hope to be here for a long time. Community engagement series, right? part of that community engagement series, and I would encourage you guys to come as you're able to. We don't have one scheduled now, but we will the last, probably after the election, so it can either be a good time and we can talk about how great it was, or it's a bad time and we can heal together, right? But we'll pick a topic like education, equity, et cetera, and we have it moderated, we have small group conversations, and the whole goal of that is to get people that may not be on the same page. And I was raised that I can agree to disagree agreeably, and that's not always the context we have now. But a lot of times people disagree because of a lack of information on certain things. Like education, kids should be able to have the resources they need to make sure that the kids are thriving. Can we all agree on that? Just about right? Now, how that is, we might disagree on, right? And that's completely fine. But I think if we can talk about those things, which is the whole idea of that community engagement series, to talk about that, to come up with ideas together so we can go advocate uniformly to get those resources or whatever for the kids, right? So the community engagement series came of that. We ran 3 of those. We obviously do our voter survey. We do forums that are coming up. We're working on all the districts as well, doing forums as well. But that's work that we're doing traditionally and going forward, right? I don't know if anybody saw last week, the 9th, it was September 9th, we did our first annual Beats and Ballots last Saturday at Acacia Park. Music festival, kind of like Rock the Vote was back in the day down south, but we didn't want to get sued, so we didn't call it Rock the Vote, right? We call it Beats and Ballots. But 1,500 people about came through over the course of the day, and that was our first annual one, right? So we just wanted to think creatively about how we can get more people engaged. We picked Acacia Park. I had a lot of people in my community mad, how come it wasn't at Panorama Park? How come it wasn't here? Because we picked it strategically. You know, that's a pretty central location, unless you're all the way up north. A lot of people are walking downtown. They heard music and just like, hey, what's going on today, right? There was a scavenger hunt happening around the park, Beauty and the Beast scavenger hunt. A lot of people were like, I'm not doing well in the scavenger hunt. What's going on over here? And they participated, right? 1,500 people came through. We were able to give away shirts, League of Women Voters, Pikes Peak Suicide Prevention. There was a bunch of different resources that Inside Out Youth Services was there. There's a bunch of different resources in the community that people may not have been as familiar with, and they can go talk about it, right? And we were able to have, Councilwoman Hingham, Michelle Tellerico, Steph Behill, Mark Snyder, Naomi Lopez, who's the president of Neighbors for Education, all able to just come out and speak about the importance of voting, right? And doing it that way, I believe we'll see increased voter turnout, because that was something that we didn't just think of. That is something that we were talking to youth, and we did a youth survey. The top two things they said that we should do to get more people to vote, number one was money. I said we can't do that because that's illegal. And we're a nonprofit, so we can't pay people to vote. We wouldn't if we could. And the second thing was, you guys should throw a big party or have fun. I said, okay, well, we can't just throw a party and say it's fun, so we got to put some more plans into that, but Beats and Ballots is what we settled on, right? And we're hoping next year that we have like 5,000 people there, because we figured out what we did wrong, figured out what we did well, and we can market it a little bit better going forward, right? So our goal, again, think about how impactful that would be in a group that votes at a 12.6% rate, to have 5,000 people come over the course of a day to hear about the importance of voting. And we had to bribe them, of course. We did raffles of like headphones, Nintendo Switches, gift cards, etc. Some of that was donated. We got sponsors and stuff, but we were able to do that and get people involved. And people now are saying, I didn't even know Citizens Project did any of this stuff, right? And we're able to plug them in now to more of the things that our organization has been able to do, because we're not doing this stuff just to get credit for Citizens Project. I'm really somebody that Sky talks to me about this often. As long as the work's getting done, my name doesn't have to be all over. I really don't care that much, as long as the work is getting done. Does that make sense? But obviously for us to get funded and people to know what we do, our name kind of has to be on stuff, right? So we wanted to partner to do that so we can have outcomes where we don't have one district in our city that has a 16-year total life expectancy, right? We wanted to make sure that there's accessible neighborhood healthcare. Like there's some of those areas down there that have one hospital, Memorial Hospital, which is closer to here, services the entire southeast of Fort Carson. And there's how many hospitals up north? Like three? And every other street there's an urgent care, right? And it's less of a population than down here that memorial services. Does that make sense? So we're doing those things just so we can close the gaps on some of that, so everybody has the opportunity to participate in elections, right? So talking to the county clerk and recorder for Denver this past week, he was very passionate about voting, which he should be in that job, right? But saying that to say, something that a lot of people do or don't do is election judges, as an example. We need election judges, right, for school board elections, et cetera, then going into next year. Anybody's able to do that. And that is one of the most important things to make sure that the process goes well. And there's been a shortage all over the state of election judges, and people get paid to be an election judge, right? Does that make sense? So that's something we're gonna try to help organize next year and going into this year, like make people aware that you can be an election judge, what those responsibilities are, and they're paid to do that. And our elections can't run well without people volunteering. Well, not volunteering, they're getting paid to do that. But people volunteering their time to go do that, to make sure our elections are secure. Does that make sense? There's so many different things and parts of an election that have to happen to make it successful. And the reality is Colorado is ranked top 3 in the country on secure elections and voter turnout. Does that make sense? One of the good things we do as a state, and then we're gonna go into like a question and answer if you guys have any questions on all this information I'm giving, is Colorado does automatic voter registration, which is good to an extent. I disagree slightly because somebody can be 16 years old, registered to vote, and at 18 years old, they don't even realize they're registered to vote. It's been a 2-year gap. They're finishing high school, they're worrying about where they're going to college, what they're going to do after they graduate high school, et cetera, and voting is not at the top of their brain, right? That's why organizations like the League of Women Voters, Colorado Latino Votes, et cetera, can say, hey, we can do a booth, and probably 80% of the quote-unquote voter registration our organizations do is just updating somebody's addresses or whatever the case would be, and now they're aware. And there's a bunch of data showing that if somebody does that on a piece of paper, their chances of turning out to vote increases over 50% by doing that, updating it, right? As opposed to automatic voter registration is great. I'm not opposed to that. It's just we have to do some things to make sure people understand that they can vote, right? Was anybody aware in Colorado that somebody can vote at 17 in a primary if they'll be 18 before the election in November, right? I see some heads shaking yes, I see some shaking no. That's something where next year, if you have someone in your family, you can tell them like, hey, you're 17 now in July, the primary is happening, and their birthday's in August. They can vote in the primary because they'll be voting in November, right? So Colorado does some unique things like that. And we just try to get that information out in conjunction with our community partners. But I don't want to just talk. So I definitely want to, if anybody has any questions, want to be able to answer some of those. But you can probably tell I'm definitely passionate about making sure people are civically engaged. Voting might not be everybody's thing, but we're all affected by people that vote or don't vote. So I think it should be everybody's thing. But voting isn't where it ends either. I try to tell that to people. I get them in the door, like, hey, vote. Then they vote. What's next? There's a gazillion committees in the city, right? There's a whole bunch of things city council does, county commission does, et cetera, that they're in a room with 2 people because people are volunteering or aware of it, right? But are there any questions on any of the work that we do?
We've got 2 microphones here. Let me start with one. We tried to host a meet and greet for some District 11 candidates in our home. One of the questions I kept getting from people of a certain age, my age, well, why should I care about District 11 school board or District 20, whatever school board? Why should I care about a school board election if I don't have any kids in school?
Great question. I think for this group specifically, I can answer this a different way than maybe some other people, but if the goal of just peace is to make sure that peace is happening through all those things, inherently we're saying that even though this may not apply to me, I want my society, my community to be better, right? And this is maybe how I would talk to people as well. We all have a responsibility to make sure our communities are better. Like, I'm not gonna litter in my community because that might blow into somebody else's yard. I could just throw it in the recycling bin or the trash can, right? voting in this is we have school board members currently who are up for reelection, and I can't name them, but if you look this up, you'll see. There are school board members currently who are proposing banning books. Currently, they are proposing banning books in the different districts. There was a school board member in school board District 11, or several school board members. One of them is not running again. He's off and is just not running, thankfully. And another one of them is running, but this school board member was proposing having porta potties across the street at Palmer for LGBTQIA students, as opposed to having an all-gender bathroom that's been happening since forever, pretty much, right? So when the schools are trying to do things that are more inclusive, you have people on the board that are saying, like, because of whatever their personal beliefs are, they want to put that in a school. And I think that it is everybody's right to have their personal beliefs. I don't necessarily believe all my personal beliefs should govern what everybody else does, though, right? You might vehemently disagree that coffee, my personal opinion, is one of the best drinks. What if you hated coffee? And I was like, you were mandated to drink coffee every day. Nobody wants that, right? But there are board members who are saying, these books that I would allow my daughter to read as a young, I wanted her to come, but she was taking too long and I didn't want to be late. My oldest. But there's books that she can read that are at a school that maybe it doesn't affect somebody else in her class, or maybe that book isn't for them, but something encouraging her to have pride in where she's came from and her hair, or different things that she may not see. They were trying to ban books like that. They have nothing to do with anything negative, and they wanted to ban that. So I would just encourage people to understand that, like, it's consequential to make sure that our students and our communities are getting what they need.
I'm a retired librarian, so I'm never in favor of banning books. I think you need to trust librarians in schools. But I have an even graver concern as a grandmother. I understand from a really great authority that one of the school District 11 members who's going to run for re-election, one of this person's goals is to arm the teachers. And even more, I'm against that. So I just wanted to alert everyone. I think banning books is a mistake, but I think arming teachers is so much greater a mistake than that. So please get involved.
Thank you for saying that. It's interesting how they'll say, we don't trust teachers to teach our kids. They have this like anti-teacher campaign they've been doing for a little bit, but then they say, the people we don't trust, we want to arm. That same school board member that she's referencing was very much anti-teachers in negotiations. District 11 has had the most hostile teacher negotiation for salary that it's had since inception. None of the other ones besides this year went past one day. This one went about 5 or 6 days of negotiation. They had to get a mediator there, all kinds of things because of that.
Hey, Mike, a much easier question than guns in schools. Is Citizens Project able to keep tabs on surrounding school districts, Falcon and Monument and Manitou?
Absolutely. So Citizens Project does work in El Paso County in general. Woodland Park is obviously a little bit outside of that parameter, but that's where Neighbors for Education comes in as well. Neighbors for Education, and I believe in about a month or so, Naomi, the president of Neighbors, is going to be speaking. Some people call us siblings, me and Naomi. Jackie Jaramillo said that me and her were siblings in a past life because we argue like siblings all the time. I love her, she's great, but she's like a sister, so we argue a little bit. We're Neighbors for Education. We partner with Citizens Project, partners with Neighbors for Education to tackle more of that. There's going to be a lawsuit in Woodland Park. The ACLU actually talked about that because of some of the stuff that they've been doing that's just very much inequitable and against the law. So Citizens Project doesn't have all the reach in the world. We have a staff of 3 full-time, 1 part-time, have a couple CC students to help us out as well. They all keep me together. I couldn't do any of this work without them. But saying that to say we don't have the capacity to necessarily do everything, but Neighbors for Education is a group that we partner with to tackle what we can.
I was going to mention that the League of Women Voters also partners with Citizens Project. We are sponsoring candidate forums in almost all the school districts the next couple months. And if you want to know more about them, go to our website at lwvpa.org. ppr.org and see what all we're going to be doing. And then this Tuesday is National Voter Registration Day. And we're going to be at 3 libraries, Penrose, Ruth Holly, and Sand Creek, to register or update voter registrations there. So try and keep up with what's going on. And also visit different neighborhoods to register voters. So we are in the same idea, and it takes a lot of organizations to help get this done.
Absolutely. And something that we have, Citizens Project, and I'll see the league doing it as well now, is like a QR code. So depending on, you guys can call our office or email us at Citizens Project. We can give you a QR code, and if you have people in your family that maybe aren't registered to vote, they can scan that QR code. It'll take them to exactly where they need to go, and it'll update their registration, or they can register. So you can be an extension of the League of Women Voters or Citizens Project with a little QR code, like, hey, are you registered to vote? And they say, I'm not sure. Hey, scan this and find out, right? So we have a bunch of those printed off and laminated that we can give out as well.
I know you can't pay people to vote, but I think it was in Australia where they decided to fine people who did not vote. It was $20 or something like that. And it had an incredible improvement in voting. And I just wonder if Citizens Project have thought about advocating anything like that.
Yeah, so we have a database that shows us low propensity voters. There's nothing that's 100% accurate that we have access to, right? But there's a system called VAN, and through that system, we can see low propensity voters. And a low propensity voter, because we always use these acronyms in terms of just people that are very much unlikely to participate, they have a score of 45% or less. So we sent out 28,000 text messages in this last election solely to low propensity voters in our city. Texting and calling now doesn't necessarily work like it did even 10 years ago as well. So we have a system where it's called layering. So we'll send out postcards, and there's many groups that help us send out postcards, because if somebody got a postcard for me with my handwriting, they might be discouraged to vote. Say, this guy shouldn't tell me to vote. So there's a bunch of people that help us write the postcards, and we send those out. We were able to send out about 5,000 of those, 28,000 text messages. We did the forums with the league. So it's called, that strategy is called layering, and the target for all those things, for me personally as Citizens Project, is people that are not as likely to vote, not necessarily people that we know are going to vote anyway, right? It's something that we're working on. Citizens Project does a legislative report card. Next year, next election cycle, next legislative cycle, it'll be updated significantly. We already have been working on it, so it's easier to read. People will be able to look at whoever their legislator is specifically and what they voted for, as opposed to how we've done it in the past. Because my thing is, if I can't give it to my wife and my daughter who's 11 and they understand it and are interested, then we need to fix it so they are, because they would be low propensity voters if I wasn't in the house, right? So that is a huge focus for us, is making sure we're making resources available. And next year, we've been working on this for over a year. We'll have a judicial report card for the first time ever. And this is a model that, when we got to speak at this conference, a bunch of people around the state we've been trying to work on something like that. How are you guys doing it? We're running into one barrier, but we have a rubric that we developed with some lawyers that are on our board, and people are doing court observations. And then we're looking at like sentencing data that people have compared to national averages, et cetera. And then we can come up with a judicial report card, right? Because a lot of the times we look at the judges, and unless you know a judge, you may not know how they did, right? That's the most mysterious thing when we're voting. So we wanted to come up with a system and a transparent rubric so people could say, this many court observations were done, this was the sentencing data that they looked at, and this is how they came up with this information. And we're partnering with Justice Watch SCC to do that.
Is there any movement to have postage paid ballots?
It's moving at a snail's pace. The question was, is there any movement on having paid postage ballots? Answer is, it's moving at a snail's pace, but it's moving forward. And that's something that Rich Law has been the person, I think, in the community really championing that, and we have a few different meetings. But we're trying to come together as organizations because we can get in front of a lot of people. Us, like, organizationally, can get in front of more people than a few other people can. So what we're trying to do is leverage that and inform people how important that is, just like how important it is that city council should get paid more. So there's a more diverse opportunity for people to be able to be on city council. It doesn't just limit it economically. And they did something in a CERT study last election cycle where they gave like 1,000 stamps to people with their postage, and like in that group of lower propensity voters, I want to say it was like above 40% of them, 40% more turned out to vote with the stamp than without a stamp.
And also, how hard would it be, or is it expensive to get public service announcements on the radio and TV? Do you have to pay to get a public service announcement?
I'm not sure.
'Cause it seems like that would happen. People don't even know there's an election,
Right.
and yet lots of people listen to the radio and watch TV. You know, and it wouldn't have to be more than 10 seconds, I don't think, you know?
I think it's hard for me to believe sometimes that people, well, actually, I can't say that. People do know there are, but not on a daily basis. And the reality is most people procrastinate. So when they get their ballot, when the election drops, what do? Put it on the fridge. And then if it's a municipal election, they're not getting a bunch of texts or something like that, they forget about it. And then they see all over the place, hey, turn your ballots in by tomorrow. They're like, I didn't even vote. And then they wasted that, or not wasted. The opportunity wasn't there for them to get that information because life is busy, right? People are busy. And it does take some time to actually look up things on a ballot, actually understand it, to make an informed decision. And there's a lot of people in our community that don't have really the privilege of taking that time when they are working 2 or 3 jobs, et cetera. So we're just trying to do things in conjunction with other organizations to make it easier for people to get that information and to encourage people to turn in their ballot much sooner than last minute, like I still do, but I still turn it in. So.
Hello, I just wanted to thank you for coming here and informing us and all the hard work and information you have with voters also. And I was just saying, it's very, very important to vote for anyone. My daughter was born in October of '84, an election.
Right.
And me and my husband were always active voters. And we took her in the store, went to vote. And they said, well, you brought your baby. I said, I'm sure. She has to learn from day one what to do. And she's always been very informed. And even now, I live with my daughter and my son-in-law. And my husband died back in 2019. But we always very, very informed. My daughter's extremely informed. Every time that we get our ballots, we sit around, power by our mothers, and we ask questions. And I say, well, what does this mean? Especially amendments. They confuse me sometimes. And we all decide on facts and everything. And when you vote, it doesn't matter if you have a child in the district or whatever. You don't vote to what only affects you. You vote what helps the community and society at large.
Absolutely. And the reality is what you're doing, that has been statistically shown to be the most effective way to get people to vote. Is like a family or trusted messengers, essentially, getting together with their family or friends around them in their spheres of influence and doing that. So it's gonna be something I do with my family going forward, because I tell them, like, come to these things, here's this, and they vote, but like we're gonna make it an exercise like that. We're gonna fill out ballots and stuff together going forward. Besides just me and my wife and my oldest daughter. The babies don't carry yet, they're too young. So.
How is Citizens Project funded?
So Citizens Project is funded through, thank you, I feel like that's a great Steve Nash question for me. We're funded through grants that we're able to receive, but most importantly, like constituents that want to donate money and see, say what we do is good. And the reality is, it's very expensive to do the work we do. The study we did, the only reason we were able to do that study, it was a very comprehensive study, is because the Colorado Trust funded it. That study cost us about $30,000 to do. But they funded the entire study. Right? That's the only reason we were able to do that. And part of that study is, and you guys, it didn't take us $30,000 to do this one page. There's a full report that you can go on our website. It says our resources, low voter turnout survey, you can see the full report. We're doing that again next year, because they want to see how much movement there was in a 2-year time period with all the things that we've been doing. So it takes a lot of money to do the work that we do. So people donating, individuals donating that believe in what we do, we call them sustainers. And then grants is generally how we're funded.
And I'd like to plug that a little bit. We've been donating since, I think, Citizens Project started in the 90s. And it's an easy thing to do as a sustainer once a month. You don't even know it's gone, just like insurance. So if you can, be a sustainer.
Absolutely.
That's my plug.
Thank you so much. And we're going to be doing, if you go to our website again, I should have, our website is www.citizensproject.org. And if you go on the page, you will see donate. I promise you, because we made sure it's on every page. So you can just go to donate now, put the information in there. You do a monthly, quarterly, once a year. And we now have a development manager because I'm in the community a lot. And Sky can probably tell you more personally that I am not always the best at following up with people individually, groups and stuff like that. Sky knows, like, hey, send Mike this email and text them, and then I do it. So now we have somebody dedicated to help us reaching out to our sustainers and to help us come up with a strategy for longer term funding. And something that we want to do is get a building where it's not just Citizens Project, but we can be in a building with other nonprofits that are doing similar work. And that could be a way to create small amounts of revenue, but also have like a nonprofit hub.
Yeah, Mike, I just want to thank you for being here today. And I want to thank Citizens Project. We moved to this town and it was the founding, right after the founding of Citizens Project, there was a gathering at the Fine Arts Center in the early 90s. And Ben and I went and we were like, thank God, like here are people in the rise of encroaching anti-inclusivity legislation and framing, and at that time anti-gay, but really finding a place that stood for inclusivity, participation, separation of church and state, and this full values alignment that I know we have here at FCC. So I was so glad to find it back in the day. We've been donors ever since. I was proud to serve as a prior board chair. I will tell you all, this is an amazing, trustworthy organization. Jump on the website, sign up to get their information. We always look at the Citizens Project voter guide to see what the candidates say about the specific questions when we're sitting at our kitchen table, and are so appreciative of the voter forums and all the partnerships that are taking place. So this is trustworthy, accountable. Jump in, join, donate, and help to create the world, the just peace world that we all want to live in.
Thank you, Lily. That was phenomenal. And I don't know how much time I have. I don't want to take up all day, but that is we really try to be, we are a nonpartisan organization, right? Like Sky said at the beginning, we're a C3, but we do have values, right? We don't want to live in a society where disenfranchised communities or marginalized communities that have been marginalized aren't able to have a voice, be advocated for, et cetera. And it's crazy that I get paid to do that now, and I've been doing it my entire life for free. It was interesting. I get paid I was doing it for free my entire life because it's something that we should. I agree, but at the same time, it's cool to be able. I'm honored. This is one of the honors of my life, besides being married to the wife I'm married to, because I definitely married up, and having the 3 girls that I have, and getting to be a dad to them. Outside of that, the honor of my life is really having the honor to lead this organization, and it's crazy that I get to do it.
So how does my grandson, who's 17, get registered? Can he just go online and do that?
So he can go online and register. He can literally Google Colorado voter registration, or, and I like to make things a little more personable, especially for youth. You can give him our email, and I'll meet with him one-on-one to walk him through that process. And the email is director@citizensproject.org, and my phone number is also on there as well. We're not always at the office because a lot of times we're in the community, but my cell phone number is on the website as well. So he can literally text me, can email me, and we'll take the time to meet with him to do that.
The other thing, if you go to the website, you can sign up for the weekly newsletter, which is really the best way to keep up with what's going on in the Citizens Project.
Absolutely.
Now, after all this love fest, Mike, I have a tough question.
Okay.
But it's one that you alluded to a second ago. And it's one that we struggle with here because there is a separation of church and state. So we advocate for values, but we don't advocate for specific candidates or political parties. Now, it doesn't take a whole lot of imagination to read between the lines to kind of connect one to the other. But you and I've talked about this before. We have to balance that here. It doesn't mean we're inactive and we're not engaged, but we have to be careful about where the lines are.
Absolutely.
How do you manage that?
Great question. I get invited to a lot of stuff, like candidates invite this, can candidates come to that. We made the decision that like Beats and Ballots as an example, that no party or candidate can have like a booth set up, right? It's either we have everybody there or we have nobody there for some of these things, right? The focus of that is getting people civically engaged to vote. So one of the ways we balance it is by getting people involved in our ecosystem, right? Not like an echo chamber, like our ecosystem, right? Where they're actually getting the information and we're helping to create informed voters. Once people are informed enough, they can make the proper decisions, right? Second thing is we ask questions in our survey and in the community asks questions in the forums that are gonna absolutely highlight the candidates whose values are what they need, what we say we espouse, right? Equity, inclusion, and justice. If somebody is saying, I don't know anybody who's advocated for banning books that was on the right side of history. I say that all the time in public, and I can say that, right? So if there's a candidate that's like, he should ban books, they're probably not on the right side of history, right? I don't think being on the side of Hitler and book banning is the side to be on, right? So I try to balance it by, keeping, for one, I don't even, on my personal Facebook, don't, candidate this, candidate that, even though those are obviously candidates I'll support. I just try to get people to understand the importance of these elections, the importance of what we're doing, the importance of those values, and honestly, naturally, they find the candidates that fit those things if they do a little bit of research.
Any other questions? Mike, I want to thank you for being here and all the work that you do. And just to reinforce this point about voter participation, if you think internationally, if you were to look at the voting statistics for what gave Britain Brexit, you will find that it was the absence of voter participation by 20 to 40-year-olds who were most affected by that decision and were 95% in favor of staying in the EU. But they stayed home and then Googled EU the day after and said, what the heck just happened? So, like local issues, voting does matter, and it's a huge issue. But thank you for being here. Thank you all for being here at the forum. And you don't want to come next week because somebody's going to talk about Ukraine. But you do want to come 2 weeks from now when Paulie Hubbard is going to have a panel on what we do as a church in mission giving and outreach. So we'll see you next week at the forum and the week after.
Thank you so much.